Hi everyone, I want to talk today about Huaishan text called Tang Family Teachings. Um, just a few words about Huaishan school. Started about 300 years ago by a guy named Liu Yuan. It's this guy in the picture. And the name of the school that we're talking about is Huaishan. The text we're going to talk about today is called Tang Family Precepts or Family Teachings. And this is a text that is transmitted from Liu Yuan and his family for many, many generations. The Huaishan school became a very big school over the last 300 years. Thousands and thousands of students coming from all over China to study there. The school, in a nutshell, Liu Yuan and the followers, his students, disciples, and children, grandchildren, they all learned from the three religions prevalent at the time in China: Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucianism, mainly Confucianism, the essence that was taught in those schools, and not so much the religious dogma and rituals. So they believed that in each religion there is truthful essence that talks about the human being, our existence, why do we exist, what's our purpose, and then from that, of course, extrapolate the heart, the emotions, and how does that affect our life, the purpose of our life, our health, our longevity, how it affects all the people around us. So this is mainly what Huaishan school was all about. Liu Yuan and his descendants. His great-grandchild, Liu Bogu, was my teacher. He passed away last year, at age 94. But I wanted to share this text that is actually hanging in my office on the wall. It's about 2.5 pages of text that I translated, and I will read with you the translation and kind of go through the concepts a little bit. So the pace here is not fast, it's not rapid, it's not a lot of content, but this text transmitted in the Liu family, from Liu Yuan to his descendants, was capturing like the basic essence that every person should know. And that's at least how Liu Yuan was thinking about teaching to his children and grandchildren. So I want to go over you with this on this text. Many patients that come here into my office ask me what's in Chinese on the wall there. So it's this text. One of the descendants of Liu Yuan actually wrote the calligraphy for me and gave it to me as a gift in one of my trips there to Chengdu in China. So again, I want to share this text with you. And so this is the text. I want to just read it and explain it. If you can sit back, it's 10, 20 minutes talk. I know that sometimes reading a text could be boring, but as much as we can have an exposure to the text and think about it together, I think will be a good idea. So Liu Yan starts by introducing the minimum that is needed for us to be a human being. And the minimum that is needed, he describes in the first few paragraphs. He says, heaven, nature, heart, goodness is what makes a person human, which means inside the heart, we have a certain energy that we received as we were conceived inside the womb. And this energy is heavenly. And just like heaven is, or the nature is constantly generous and creating and generating life one generation after the other, so is the human heart deep inside, underneath many layers, is exactly like this. So this is called heaven, nature, heart, goodness. So the heart deep inside, the goodness in it is just like the nature of heaven, the character of heaven. Being generous and kind is the reason heaven and earth last for eternity. Or in other words, all the selfish desires that we have, and we'll talk about it a little bit more down the text, but the desires that we have is actually what brings our impermanence. It makes us not permanent. If we were so generous and kind, just like heaven and earth are, then the the life that we can experience could be eternal. Now you would say a human being normally die after 100 years, but if you think about it, some sages that had like tremendous connection deep inside, the teaching, the energy that they were conveying is lasting for thousands of years, just like Buddha and Confucius and Lao Tzu, Taoism, other sages throughout, different philosophies and religions in the world. They got to a place that is very, very pure of kindness and generosity, just like heaven. And then the word that they're saying is actually lasting forever. Obscuring goodness and going against heaven nature, then one is not human. Not human, of course, it's hard for us to understand because every person is a human being. But what Liu Yuan says is that if we probe inside the heart to a place that is very pure, then the true humaneness of a person comes out. And if we don't go into those layers that are very deep inside, then a person is not fully capable of humaneness. So the more we're on the outside emotions and desires, the less of this pure humaneness that we experience, or the less we express it. He asks a rhetoric question: how can one conform to heaven while being impatient and ungenerous? So how can you really become one with this, with this energy that we have deep inside the heart, the heaven energy that we have inside? How can you become one with it if you have these tendencies for intolerance and being impatient and aggressive and angry and things like that? When one attains heaven nature, he then becomes human. Therefore, heaven and earth are like one's father and mother. In other words, we are human beings, and this humanity that we have inside the heart, it's something that is, divine, and it is within each person. And so when we find this and we become connected to it, we express our full humanity, and therefore it says this part of us is given to us by heaven and earth, by nature. Heaven gives us this part. That's why we say heaven and earth are like my father and mother. They give birth to me, to that part that is so pure deep inside. My physical father and mother, the flesh and blood, they gave me my body, my physicality. And so Liu Yuan make the comparison between the heaven and earth that are my father and mother, that gives me this energy, this light inside my heart that makes me human, to the physical father and mother that actually procreated and created my body to contain this light in it. And it says, therefore, the father and mother of a person, the physical father and mother, are just like the father and mother from heaven and earth, like the ones that gave me the light inside the heart, the one that gives me the body. They are alike, they are of kin, they are similar. So he goes a little bit deeper into it, and he says, look, if you deceive your physical parents, even though it is easy, however, when you do that, you actually deceive in the heaven and earth, and they, like the spirits in heaven and the energy, that the cosmic energy that we have, you cannot really deceive it. Deceiving human being in general, it's something that is very limited in this space and time that we have around us. So my heart could try to deceive another human heart, but the heaven, we cannot deceive. So he says, if you deceive your physical parents, actually you cheated the heaven and earth, and you cannot really hide it. So don't think that you can hide it. He says, even a single thought deceiving heavens makes one not filial or respectful to the physical parents. And even a single thought of deceiving one's physical parents becomes an offense against heaven. So Liu Yuan here at the very beginning describes the minimum of this humanity we talks about. The minimum is that we realize that life comes to us from heaven, the physical body comes to us from our parents, and there's nothing else that we're supposed to do except knowing it and appreciating it. And therefore, we call it like respecting or being filial, respecting to heaven, filial to the parents. So this is the minimum that the human being needs. And if we cannot get to that level, of course, everything else that we're talking about will have difficulty. He says to cultivate Tao, to start working on ourselves so we find more and more the core inside, is an imperial decree, imperial edict toward one's parents. Like you have to do it in order to fulfill, we have to do it in order to fulfill our purpose in this life. Respecting one's father and mother, just like we respect heaven and earth, fulfilling one's true nature, really the energy that we have inside, is like an envoy and serving heaven and earth, just like serving one's father and mother. So, in other words, what Liu Yan here explains that for us to discover ourselves and realize deep inside how divine we are is not something that is very casual, that we may or may not do it. It's like this is the main mission that we have in our life, is to find who we truly are inside, underneath all the masks and all the different things that we are conditioned during our lifetime. He says this is like an imperial decree, like you have to do it. It's like an envoy, someone who's a messenger that come to fulfill its purpose. Filial piety towards our parents comes from cultivating virtue, while virtue comes from cultivating one's heart. These are different progression that we learn at the end of this text. I will mention the great learning. The methods are described there in detail, how to progress in these methods. Transforming a child's filial piety into a faithful official reaches the objective of not deceiving and not being reckless. So this minimum thing that we learn to recognize heaven and recognize our parents that help us have the light inside our heart and the physical body to carry it is really the foundation for everything else that exists in the world, in all the relationships. So here, the description of becoming a faithful or loyal official, which is a Confucian idea, basically shows that if we start at the very minimum, recognizing that we are human, that life comes to us from heaven, the body comes to us from our parents, and the heaven and earth is just like our physical parents, mother and father. When we recognize this and this minimum goodness start emanate through our body, then everything else comes to the front. That includes becoming loyal and trustworthy and everything else in human relationship, a good official in the government, a leader in the community, an example as a father or mother to your children, and so forth. Everything starts in that very basic foundation. So this is the first part in the text where Liu Yan explained the minimum that is needed to be a human. Next, he started talking about the methods to start to probe. And keep in mind that this text is what he transmits to his children and grandchildren. It's in the family documents telling them, you know, you all have busy lives, you have a job, you have things that you have to do in school, right? We have a lot of worries, paying the bills, and that was like this 300 years ago, the very same way that it's today. But he says, put aside everything that seems so important and start focusing or finding out what's really important. So this is what the text that Liu Yan is transmitting to his children. He says, he teaches them, pay attention what's really important. Now, after describing the minimum that is needed, like, you know, recognizing the heaven and the parents that we explained before and becoming human, Liu Yan starts to explain the methods. How do we get there? So he says, preserving stillness, one can begin properly inspecting movements. So there are two things that have to happen in our life to go towards the self, to discover the self. One of them, the second one mentioning here in this quote, called inspecting movement. Inspecting movement is to gradually and constantly reflect on my thoughts and actions and emotions and befriend them. This is called inspecting movements. So which movements are we inspecting? The movements of the heart, like when the emotions move, when the desire moves from center, from a point that is called center, when it starts wanting or needing, This is called a movement. When the thought arises, I start thinking of something, this is called a movement. And inspecting movement is like a reflecting type method to reflect on my emotions, my desires, my thoughts, to gradually become aware of their pattern. So well, let's say I'm 40-year-old or 50-year-old or 20-year-old. All of a sudden, I decided I want to start the self-discovery path. Right? We call it self-cultivation. So I start in a certain place that I need to start to discover first the pattern that have been created since I was born. So if I'm 50-year-old, for the last 50 years, I start to reflect on these patterns, how my emotion comes about, when I get angry, when I get upset, when the thoughts start coming up. Yuan says here that only when we do preserving stillness, which are different meditation techniques, that properly we can start inspecting. So we can start this inspecting movement. You know, when I get angry, reflect on it. How does it feel? But when we don't have foundation, that here it's called preserving stillness, then the inspecting movement is limited. So like if I have a certain character cultivated over 50 years, so my heart is already operating in a certain way, and let's say something triggers me and I get angry. So now I got angry and I reflect on it, and it happens again and again and again, but I cannot change it. So that reflection, when I reflect on it, actually does not make me aware of it. I will always be able to reflect on it after the effect. So this has a very limited success. But if we can preserve stillness, learn different type meditation techniques, that I can start feeling the energy inside. Remember before I mentioned the light, there's light inside the heart. If I can start feeling that light, that gives me an anchoring point. And from there, from developing that ability, I start to reflect on my movements, the heart movements. And then I start to progress deeper and deeper. Then I change them. Then I can change. So he said, one must not be lazy or forget about this practice of preserving stillness, that, you know, every day we should meditate a few times. And of course, we need to learn different methods to meditate. Not everything is as effective. So not all meditation methods are equal, but we should study some good methods so we can then start reflecting on our movements and change them. So he says, when one offends with licentiousness, he becomes like a beast, and when he desires power and profit, he changes into a mean and despicable person. So these are just examples of Cheng dynasty 200 years ago, talking about when the heart desires are very heavy, very severe. Of course, we are very far from where we're supposed to be. Preserving stillness allows us to inspect the movement and get closer and closer to center, where, you know, we're getting to where we're supposed to be. To take good care of one's health and perform good deeds is the meaning of keeping oneself flawless and sincere. These are concepts from the great learning text, the Confucian text. But it basically means that we want to do every thoughts and words and actions that we do, we want them to be as close to the light inside the heart as possible, and not to the desires and the emotions on the outside, but rather to this heaven, the pure heaven in me, that will propel my thoughts, words, and actions. So this is called to take good care of one's health and perform good deeds, etc. And to know what is wrong and constantly correct one's own errors is the path of aspiring to the sage and virtuous. Observing movement while we preserve stillness, we keep on fixing the movement until the deviation from center, it's called, is much smaller, and then the application of it, we'll talk about that next. Life is short like a dream, where cultivating goodness and doing good deeds receives blessings and is the only meaningful thing. So this is really what we want to do when we preserve stillness and observe movement, and we correct the error to get closer and closer to the center. This Tao of learning how to become human is hard to learn, and therefore one must follow his parents' and teachers' instructions. This is one of the principles of Huai Chuan, to say that of course we can try to do everything by ourselves and maybe read books, but we do need some teachers who have gotten ahead and show us the way. Reading and practicing is extremely important, but we do need to get some guidance to really not go astray and progress in this way, which is very long, and we could use some help. When one carries shame in his heart, how can he set an example at home as a husband or father? So here, when one takes an action being insincere, how can he be a loyal minister or a filial son? So when we say, this Tao is very difficult to learn and we need guidance. And after we have guidance, we need to practice preserving stillness and observing movement until we get closer and closer to the inner heart where there's a lot of light and not a lot of desires and emotions. Because otherwise, if we don't do it, if we don't get closer to the center and to this heaven in me, and I have, what he calls shame in the heart. Shame in the heart means that the desires on the outside, they guide my thoughts and words and actions. And oftentimes that yield poor results. Like when my desires on the outside are dominant and they guide me, oftentimes I will get angry with other people. There'll be a lot of frictions in relationship. So how can I be, exemplary father or mother? How can I be exemplary teachers to teach people? Here, Liu Yuan explains that it always has to be like leading by example. So, and if we don't cultivate it, then what's going to happen with the next generation, right? It's all going to go down the hill, because if there's no one to show by example how it's done right, it's not something that you can just teach orally or in writing, but you can allow yourself not to show it by self-example. So going on to the application of it, so not just the method of preserving stillness and observing movement, going into when it comes out to the world, what happens? Like, how does it look like? It says, to govern the country, there is no need for many methods other than thoroughly nurturing and teaching. This is what we just said at the beginning of this talk, right at the top of this text. Where could there be difficulty in learning the sage's teachings? One only needs the Tao of forgiveness. When one is diligent with his profession and cultivates his heart, how could he suffer hunger and cold? In contrast, when one has greed and lust, it will harm his heart and life. Here, Liu Yuan emphasizes that despite, and contrary to what people normally believe, many times we follow the external heart, the emotions and desires, and we think that we need more. Like we become a little bit more possessive, a little bit more greedy, more needy. And we believe that if we needed, if we wanted more, we will have more. But Liu Yuan, I think on a very deep level, is explaining that like when you find the goodness in the heart and you become like heaven, everything that you think, everything that you say, everything that you do is like brings prosperity to yourself and to other people. And this is based in reality. Like when you get to that level, you realize that when you do good things, when you think good thoughts, and when you say good things all around everything, to everybody around you, there is no way that you can be hungry and suffer from cold. Like you become really, really poor. There's nowhere to live. You're in the snowstorm outside in the cold, and there's no food, minimum food to eat. And it's contrary to what people believe. And he explained it to his children. He said, this is not how it works. Like to find really the most important thing inside gives blessing. Like heaven blesses you. So when you have your thoughts and words and actions right, really coming from deep inside, from goodness, from generosity and kindness, there is no way that you'll be poor on the street. There is no way that you'll be hungry or cold, So this is something, we can reflect on and see how much we can resonate. He says, furthermore, in the application of this method, between brothers, the principle should be giving way to each other, should be kindness, generosity to each other, not jealous, not harming each other, not scolding each other. And while bringing the household in order, like between the parents who lead the household, the father and the mother, there should be a harmony. Husband and wife comes first. The harmony between the husband and wife comes first. So we need these priorities within the very close relationship that we have. And if we don't have this harmony between husband and wife, if we don't have this giving way and respect between brothers, we don't have this filial piety to parents, compassion and love to children, right? We self-reflect on ourselves. We're not necessarily, we shouldn't be critical and feel guilty and judgmental, but rather realize that, hey, it's going sideways. That's not how it should be. That's not what should happen. And we keep on preserving stillness and observing movement and getting closer and closer to a place that is better. On the other hand, he said, when one is gentle and kind-hearted, respectful and modest, then everyone and everything he deals with prosper like the spring wind, when flowers come out, leaves start to come out, trees grow. With regards to reading, when we read books, or let's say in modern time, when we look online on TikTok and social media, Facebook, one must read virtuous books and look at things that teach goodness, not that things that distract us and make us crazy. And with affairs, one must act according to Confucius and Mencius, which talk about, a human being deep inside is human. I mean, it sounds weird when I said, but he's human first. And human means wants to give and help, be kind and generous. That's human. To be human, one must become a good person, or a person full of goodness, full of desire or drive to do good things, to think good thoughts and to say good words. And he must revere the spirit in heaven, restraining himself from doing any evil. So here, the spirit in heaven, which is a quasi-religious concept, basically mean that the heaven that surrounds us is inside of us. And when the external heart that is full of desires and emotions and some sort of selfishness, when this drives us and make us do things, it prevents the heaven in us to express itself. We call it, it becomes dimmer, darker, prevents the light from coming out. And in this time, the heaven in outside, in the world, in nature, the driving force in nature and the light inside me are connected, and there is a consciousness that realizes it. So when we talk about spirit in heaven, it means when the external heart diminishes my goodness, deep inside the heart, it's known. It's known. It's like there's no one to hide it from other people, because other people's ability to see through is limited. So you can, pretend things. But really, in the big picture, how we're connected to nature, there's a consciousness in there's no way to hide it. So the goodness inside has to be real. We cannot pretend it. It has to be real. Hoping to accomplish good for one's children and grandchildren, accumulating virtue and leading by example by far surpasses accumulating money. When one often cheats and swindles, this only hurts himself. How could it hurt others? And Liu Yuan here teaches his children how to become good people. And the reason that he says is because this is a known problem. It was a known problem hundreds and hundreds of years ago, and it is a known problem today. That the external heart with the desires, emotions, and feeling the selfish side become dominant. I feel that I don't have enough, that I need more. And when that starts to be the guiding principle of my life, sometimes it makes people, choose the wrong things, like to eat other people, to swindle, and because we can hide it, we're convinced that other people can't see it, we kind of feel comfortable with it. So again, here Liu Yuan, he's not lecturing the world. This is a text that he transmit to his kids. He had 8 sons, 8 children that he was giving it to, and they had many grandkids. Transmitted to them. That was the meaning of it, not really lecturing the world. It was very important for him to teach his children how to become good people, good humans. Prior generations had many aphorisms, but the crux lies with us putting it into practice. Where he says, specifically talking about religions, Confucianism, Taoism, the religion side of it. There's a lot of big talk about spirits and things and being afraid of sins and punishments and things like that. But he says this is really not where the heart of the matter is. The heart of the matter is that we want to express the life in us fully. And when we put it into practice, we practice it to be good. We practice the thoughts to be good, the words to be good. Then this is where it's at. It's really just putting your humanity into practice. That's where it's at. Not with ceremonies and all kind of other lofty talk. So where does such sagely outstanding achievement comes from? One must first make his heart proper and remove selfish desire. So this is part of preserving stillness and observing movements. We realize we get angry, we realize we were selfish, and while we do meditative techniques that we can learn the energy inside, and we use it as an anchor, we start doing observing movement, and we make our emotions, the negative emotions, smaller and smaller and smaller. So getting less angry, less selfish, less agitated, less arrogant. But we're making this less and less and less, until really the goodness inside has free reign, or it can come out easily. After removing selfish desires, one then truly becomes smart. When we talk about knowledge, there's knowledge that we read in books, but true knowledge comes from really knowing what's good. And when we truly recognize what's good and we start thinking about this or that or the other, we can tell what's right, what's wrong, what's helpful for a human being and what's not helpful. They said, thus, reaching knowledge is preceded by sorting one's heart. And these are, of course, concept or progression in the great learning text from Confucius, 2,500 years ago. When thoughts are good, then right and wrong are distinguished clearly or easily. You're not fooled by TikTok videos and social media, but rather, this is good for humans. This is not good for humans. Before reaching that level of inner knowledge, we kind of rely on social dogma. When in society you start hearing a lot of people say, hey, this is good, that other thing is not good, we have that tendency to say, okay, that bigger group of people or that specific group of people say that this is good and this is probably good. But Liu Yan says, knowing good and not good, good and bad, right and wrong, it's something that relies on our own self-recognition of heaven. Like we know the goodness inside, and then we can tell this is right, this is wrong. So this is something we progress toward. One's daily practice is that of a sincere intention and pure conscience. Sincere intention means that when my thought and my words and actions happen completely according to the light, the humanity that I have inside the heart, not the social thing that was constructed outside, through the emotions and feeling and how I feel, right? There's a construction on the outside of the heart. And we can also have an opinion there. Everyone has an opinion. But sincere intention is actually not an opinion. Sincere intention, it means I feel the heaven in me, and the action that I do, the words that I say, the thoughts that come out to my mind, are of pure goodness. They will generate, just like the spring wind, they will bring prosperity. The person you're talking to will flourish. Myself will flourish too. So when this happens, we say, this is sincere intention. To nurtures one's heart and makes one's energy proper at a minimum can prolong one's longevity. Here we're talking about the results. So what is the result of us finding the light inside the heart, not being selfish, not getting angry, not being so irritated all the time. Like, what's the result? At the minimum, we say, Liu Yuan says, it will prolong. This is like the secret for longevity. This is how people live longer. But it's much more than this. At the minimum, it will make you longer, but it's much more. So the question is like, then, so what's more than that? I mean, I'm the most important, I'm the center of the universe, I'm now living longer. Like, this is already the best. But Liu Yan says, no, this is actually the small benefit, the minimum. Just going to live longer, be healthier, less disease, and so forth. The skill of making oneself proper and then helping others to become proper is entirely within the lines of the great learning, that text. That text is super interesting, and there's some courses that I did about it. There's a text that you can get with Liu Yan translation, which is very beautiful. But just the first line starts by saying the Tao of the great learning is by realizing the illuminating virtue, which means by realizing the light that we have inside the heart. It goes on to say the Tao of the great learning is by becoming close to people, like heart to heart, in the family, with friends, in the society at large. Becoming close to people, this is the Tao of the great learning. And from there, it goes to the different steps, how to progress by making the heart proper, sorting the heart, reaching to knowledge, and so forth. There are different progression steps, how to get there. But the big picture of the great learning, I'm just explaining it here for a moment, is realizing that inside there's light, heaven light, inside the heart. That's the humanity of the person. And that humanity expresses itself by touching in relationships, different relationships, friends, with family, husband, wife, parents, children, siblings, students, patients, whatever it is, any relationships that we have with other humans. This is where the heaven can express itself, or of course can go wrong. So when the heart is driven by external desires, selfish desires, then oftentimes we get angry, we get more deceitful, and other things that are not so, don't have so much light in them, and they create more destruction. So, and he says, this Tao of the great learning must be pursued endlessly, while its skill comes from constantly reflecting on oneself, like we said, observing movement. If above, like if on the big picture, one does not properly lead by example, then wherefrom would future generations' talent come? So if we don't work on ourselves, self-reflect, and become more human, then where is humanity going? So if we don't have the prior generation lead by example, becoming more human, so the children and the student can see the humanity that is more intense and learn from it and become more human themselves. If we don't have that structure, then the humanity deteriorates from one generation to the others. And this is the big picture. Like, why is it important? What does it mean that we become like heaven? Heaven generate life one generation after the other. Like, there's one tree and the seed falls to the ground, and there's another tree and another tree, or there's one person, and a child and another child and another child, right? We're going from one generation to the other. But it cannot be that heaven will create generation after generation for many, many millions of years of life cycles that go on, and the humanity that we have in ourselves is the purpose of why we're here will get diminished. So one generation after the other will become less human, more wars and more hatred and more anger and anxiety. And of course, that happens plenty that we can see around. And that deterioration is not a new thing. So the purpose of learning and cultivation is not just to let it flow any way it goes. So, if we just become selfish, so be it. We become selfish, whatever. Because then the next generation become more selfish, more selfish, and more selfish. And in the end, humanity does not exist anymore. We become like the animals. Animals, of course, they have a good side to them. There could be beautiful. Animals are beautiful. They're like part of heaven and earth. But when we talk about humanity, this is something that is typical for humans. That's why we call it humanity. Typical for human to have deep inside the heart that can spread light to all the animal kingdoms and all the vegetable kingdom, everything, So like the entire world, we can make the entire world exist by humanity. But if the humans become like the animals and there are no more humans anymore, there's no one that can do something good. To the contrary, we have humans or people that just are busy with destruction. And obviously the end is not that great. This is what he says, future generations' talent. The talent talks about having the ability to be more human. Various human relations between parents, children, husband, wife, friends, in the government, citizens of the country, the town, in any group, any relationship between people, stem from one's heart, from one's heart and true nature. The heart and deep inside the light that we get from heaven. So all the human relationships, they start from there. And of course, they go wrong when the external heart of desires and selfishness is dominant. So when this is dominant, all the relationships go wrong. And when the heart is cultivated and we can find the humanity inside of us, then all the relationships are flourishing. Everything, the humanity around is flourishing. And therefore, Confucius, thousands of years ago, said all of them, all the human relationships, are described as one principle penetrates all. So even though it's different relationship of closeness and distance between a child and a parent, and between friends and between strangers, right? So the distance is different in the relationship, but the pathway of energy that goes between heart to heart or glides on the heart, the light from inside the heaven simply goes over the emotions, flow with the emotion between heart to heart, so you can feel one's intention from very far away. You can feel it despite not having any physical contact, because it floats on the emotions. The intent that comes from inside the heart floats, like flowing with it, like flowing with water. It reaches in a space that is totally not physical emotion. Like when someone, let's say, get angry with you and a negative emotion is generated, you feel that as if someone is punching you. Like you feel the anger and it pinches you inside the heart, and vice versa, of course, if it's a feeling of goodness that flows out. You feel it from very far away. It can heal your heart, it can heal your body. Right? So this is what Confucius called one principle penetrates all. Everything, all the different relationship is this one principle. When the study of this skill is flashy and without substance, then all the affairs deteriorate. So if we just talk, but we don't practice preserving stillness and observing movement, we don't work on ourself, what is called cultivating the self in order to cultivate another person. If we don't work on ourselves first, and we just try to teach others, give them lectures about what they should do, but we ourselves, we don't work too hard on ourselves, then this is called without substance. It doesn't have substance, and then even though it looks flashy and there's a big talk about spirits and heaven and things like that, but at the end it does not touch the heart of the other person, and that other person does not really lead by example of goodness, but rather just flashy talk, empty talk. So he says the bad things, which include this, avoid it. Don't do this flashy talk. Don't give a big talk. Just do a lot of self-cultivation, work on yourself, and then show to others how it's done. You tell them this is how it is. So the good things, how it is, when you start feeling the goodness, you start feeling it, just show it. Right? You can talk about it, but you show it. So he says, make an effort to do it. In some, do not substitute the ancestors' teaching. Ancestors here, he talks about Confucius and Mencius from 2,500 years ago. So this complete the text, the teachings that Liu Yuan transmitted in his family for generations. This is just the Chinese text. You can download it. You can also send me direct message if you want a link to it on Facebook, another platform. I put a link where you can download this text and read it over and over if you would like. So I do want to thank you for watching this talk about Cheng Tang family teachings by Liu Yuan, transmitted to his family in the last 250 years. So have a great day, and I will see you in another talk.